Well, hello everyone. Good day, good evening, good night, good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm PL Stewart, the Dragon Saga. Welcome back to my channel, Six Elementals. And today I have an incredibly special and very unique Six Elementals interview. For those of you who are familiar with this concept of Six Elementals, I have typically been interviewing creatives such as published authors, bloggers, booktubers. However, the writing community is made up of a huge swath of people, agents, editors, and but one of the most important components that perhaps doesn't get as much recognition as they deserve are readers, supporters, people who may or may not be creating themselves, but they're the ones that are boosting the works of the booktubers and authors. They're shouting them out in social media. They're doing reviews. They're doing all kinds of things that oftentimes I feel goes unnoticed, perhaps, or if not unnoticed, perhaps not as recognized as I think all of us would agree that they should be. So, in that vein, I decided to do hopefully a series of essentially appreciation six elementals with prominent supporters of the community. And I could think of no better person to start the inaugural one of these than the fantastic Chibipoe. Chibipoe, welcome and thanks so much for coming. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I am so honored. And you do so much for the community. I think a lot of us here, our hearts light up when we see you pop in to a live broadcast or to see you comment on something on social media. You've just been so supportive. How long have you been involved essentially in the whole writing community? If do you remember when you got started?
Um, the earliest, and I think at that point the writing community was a lot very different then. Because we didn't have booktube at all at that point. Um, but I'd say my earliest would run back into uh, the early '90s. Um,
Wow.
well, maybe not the early '90s, but the '90s at least, mid to late. Um, where with like Jenny Wertz's forum, and um, I conversed with a couple other authors a few years, later after that, like on LiveJournal with Michelle West.
Oh,
Um, I didn't, branch out a whole lot to many others, but uh, just community in general, yeah, that would, or not general and specific to them, would have been with those two. And I think I would try to follow some of the early days of the internet, some of the others like uh, and just see what they were doing, like Melanie Ron and so forth. But yeah, it goes back a while. And then I just sort of mostly I lurked though, so I wasn't ever really you know um, a large presence. You know. Um, in places. It's like I think if you go back onto Jenny's forums and dig into the old archived stuff, you can probably find posts for me in there. Um, you know, uh, from stuff that's way, way, way back. So
wow. What was it like back then? Like and how has it evolved? Like, when you first started in terms of the online presence and followers and people boosted, like what was it like and how has it evolved into now the way it is today?
um, so hold on, sorry. I have to had to someone tried to call me. I told them not to call me at this point. Um, uh, in some ways, it's still the same, but like a lot of a fictionless fiction discussion would be uh, I don't want to say corralled, but in some ways it was localized to specific places. I think if you get her to talk about it, Jenny will talk about like bulletin boards like Genie and whatnot. This, but that's even further back than uh,
Wow.
where I was. And there'd be things like news groups like Rec Arts, uh, anime, or novels or fiction, and IRC channels and things, which IRC's kind of gone and is still there, but it's sort of been replaced by things like Discord and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then of course, they'll have their own websites. There wasn't a whole lot of the video stuff though, because no YouTube back then. So and not much in the way of broadband. It's like dial up.
Oh wow. How no? So now that things have come to this point, and I know you seem to be one of those like ubiquitous, omnipresent people who are always supporting, always boosting, shouting out authors, shouting out tubers. But are you actually involved in a lot of these spaces, like a lot of Discords and a lot of forums and stuff? Are you actually involved in a lot of those?
A few. I do have a bunch of Discords. As far as like for official type people, most of my Discord stuff activity is fan related. I should probably hop into some more of the booktube Discords, but I have to actually look up their links to for some of them. And at some points I look at my list of Discords and I'm like, I have too many of these. Why do I have so many of these? I should probably prune some of them. But otherwise, a lot of times, like I said, I tend to lurk, and in some places, I'll pop into places like Page Chewing, and there's a couple others. I think I linked you one with some of my fan fiction writing. Just a generalized fan website where they just talk about anything. But as far as specific ones, just a couple of people, and they just didn't have the energy to be a constant, super present all over them. So I tend to try to just focus in a couple of areas, where I can keep my energy up, because it's like when you're hopping from one to the other, and I'm like, it can get exhausting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What do you think the impact is of these groups and these discords and these spaces where readers and fans can get together and chat, at length actually, and ad nauseum about all kinds of things? Typically, they have so many different subthreads, and you can chat about all kinds of things, not even necessarily germane to that particular topic or group or author. What's the impact of all of these groups, positive and or negative, that you
overall, I would say positive, because it allows lots of of spaces to come together. Great. I do think there is a bit of a negative impact on some of them, especially if they but it depends on whether they're generalized or specialized, where they can kind of get rather insular, and and then just sort of not be interested in anything that doesn't pertain to their it's not germane to their top whatever their pet blorbo is. They're like, oh yeah, I want to follow I don't know, Anne Rice. We'll use her. Just and then they just it's all they want to talk about, and which fair, but when a lot of sometimes it'll just start out as more generalized, or they'll just get really insular about what they want to talk about, and then just kind of exclude everything. And we kind of see some of the some of that even in the larger areas where like looking like our fantasy, for example, on Reddit. You go in there looking for recommendations, and you're probably going to get the same five recommendations. And there isn't a lot of you pop up, but you got to look for them, and the discussion moves so fast that you can blink and you miss them because of how their forums, their discussion threads are set up. And So you just go in, you're looking for, hey, it's like I really love this great author, and I want to go talk to them about it here, and then you get someone who'll be like, oh well, you know I don't like that, and or they use the opportunity to be like, well, if you like this, you should absolutely go read such and such, and just turn the topic around to not what you were there to talk about. So yeah, overall, like I said, positive, but I think there's some definite downsides. I don't know how we would fix that, but I guess just people are trying to put effort, but sometimes with our fantasy, I think it's a bit of a lost cause because it's just if you've ever been on there, it's like it just goes so fast.
Yeah.
There's so many people, and and with some of the rules they've imposed, it's just like you try to discuss something and it just gets drowned in the in all the topics.
And yeah, that's a really interesting point. And yet, isn't there? And you correct me if I'm wrong, and because I don't hang out particularly much on our fantasy, for example, I know that's one of the bigger ones. Isn't there, generally speaking, like a kind of a general code of conduct or decorum that most participants, hopefully, they're trying, and I would assume we're trying to adhere to. And when things kind of go off the rails or go offside, there's and again, correct me if I'm wrong, like threads can get shut down or people get sanctioned or things like that happen. Is that how it works?
Yeah, like most forums, settings, they do have moderators. And so in theory, that's the what should happen. It's one of those, though, I think in practice it's just, I'm not sure how many they have, but there's so much
Yeah.
So much, and I'm not even saying that, like, some of the people who will go into derail to be like, you're here to talk about I don't know, we're going to talk about PL Stewart's book, and then they're like, no, I want to I'm going to recommend, if you like that, go read Brandon Sanderson or something like that. And I'm like, and and then and then just from the sheer, like I said, from the sheer thing, because you can go on there, post a thread, and then watch your thread immediately get bumped to the next page because of so many people posting other stuff or things getting bumped up. So a good portion of it isn't necessarily, and I don't even think that the people who would, chime in to be like, I'm recommending something else to you, or doing it out of, hostility. They're just like, I want to recommend my thing. And then, and just, and then just from, like I said, the sheer volume of everything, some makes it hard to actually get heard.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, the whole point of these is that people are there because they're passionate and they're enthusiastic, and they want to, they want to talk about certain things and really dive deep into it with people who are similarly passionate or people who have, similar opinions or even contrasting opinions. And of course, it's funny when you talk about, Rex. Yeah, you can go on some of these forums and sometimes, you get the same. Okay, the Malazans of the times, a lot of the same Rex. I feel maybe regurgitated. But that said, there are a lot of people who read widely or who are willing to support things widely, and they put out recs and give fantastic recs about books that, I didn't know about that one, and you go check it out. But yeah, it's I think it's always refreshing when you find the ones that it's not so much an echo chamber of things that you kind of hear all the time, but are very broad and expansive. And like you said, I guess some of the downside is some of them are so big that you can feel, lost in all the vast sub threads and all that stuff. Do you have any ones that you particularly prefer? Any sites that you really are starting to really vibe with and love in the last little while that you're on more than others, perhaps?
I lurk mostly over on the page chewing forums, and then chime in every now and then. I've honestly never been a super active, poster, just because either I don't have the time, or, I'm out doing something, or or if I'm at my computer, I have more interesting, trying to do things, other than posting on the internet. I've had my moments of say, oh, I'm going to go post on the internet now, and that can be fun, but can also lead you into some some wild places if you get into the habit of that. Um, but that's more in generality. So page chewing, a couple of, I mentioned, two, just, they're more generalized forums, and I think this will, segue into something you were wanting to talk about too, where I post, some of the stuff that I write, which, not everything I write, but I do have some fan fiction that I've got out there. So I post that. And that's, but they're just generalized, just a general sci-fi fantasy, bunch of nerds talking. So it's like, it's like spacebattles.com, forums.spacebattles.com, and one of their sister sites, Sufficient Velocity. And so, yeah, that's about the main places that I go, other than like free, only dipping into, a couple of fan author sites like Janie's site, to see what's going on there. But
yeah. I want, and I definitely want to come back to what you're writing, and because that's fascinating, and I'm really excited and enthused about that. But I want to quickly staying on this topic of sites. You mentioned page chewing. And speaking of page chewing, I just want to put up a quick comment. We have the awesome booktuber Chris Mohan. Hey, how's it going, Chris? Thanks for stopping by, my friend. Wonderful
Chris,
booktuber. Check out Chris' channel.
Night, for you. Why are you awake?
Yeah, I guess on the UK side, you're up late, my friend. So, but thanks for popping in. We appreciate it. Wonderful, wonderful fellow. Hopefully, we're going to have Chris on the channel at some point down the road if he's willing. Chibipoe, yeah. So, can you tell us a bit about page chewing specifically? What is it about page chewing, that site, that really draws you in and makes you want to get involved in that site?
In some ways it's a lot similar to the others. I just there's a variety of discussion there and a lot of different topics. And they've got they talk about some of the authors that I'm interested in. Of course, I think that was probably one. I don't remember how I came across them, but I signed up because and I think that may have been what I actually signed up for, was to be like, I'm going to promote Jenny's stuff on there, and that sort of ballooned into our bi-weekly discussion with Chris and others that we're having on the series right now. So, but yeah, just in general, like there's I guess for the sites where I do like spending time on, it just ends up being that there's a variety of discussion. They don't just talk about one thing. There's there's book discussion, there's movie discussion, video games, and so forth. I think books tends to be the most dominant on page chewing's forums, which is probably a big reason I like it. It's just like, it's primarily books, whereas like the others I mentioned, like Space Battles and Sufficient Velocity, tend to be more focused. Books will come up, but they tend to be more focused on sci-fi television and anime and video games and whatnot. And so books kind of don't get as much play there. So
I understand. Okay, that makes sense. And so you mentioned about specifically Jenny Wirtz, my favorite author. I believe your favorite author. One of I think the most iconic fantasy authors of all time, and her Wars of Light Shadow series, and the ongoing deep dives that people such as you and Chris are doing on page chewing. So going back, you said that Jenny and supporting her work was one of the reasons why you kind of really got involved in the community. What is it about Jenny and her writing specifically? So now we're talking about some of the reasons that keep you involved in the community. What is it about Jenny, the person, and her writing specifically, that have kept you really involved in that support appreciation aspect?
Oh wow, that's a good one. Um, oh, I'm trying to think of how I want to even answer that. Basically, it's like ever since I first came across the books, and like I said, I still remember to this day when I'd found her. I found her first in a library
Okay.
with um, it might have been Master Whitestorm. It was the first one I found, or maybe it was Empire. I don't know. Um, it's that's over 30 years ago now. So,
Wow.
but I do remember that I was familiar with her, and I had gotten the books, some of her books, and read them, and then I happened to be in, and this is going to date me a little bit because how much the in some ways the bookshelf sections in stores have changed. I was in a little grocery store, chain of grocery stores,
Yeah.
and happened over to their little section of books because I was even at that point it was like books, and they'd always have a really good uh, often a frequent selection of fantasy books, and I happened to see a copy paperback, mass market paperback copy, original copy of Ships of Marior, with the Bequest of the Master Bard picture with Erethan and the Lyric,
Yes.
and picked that one up, and so that was my introduction to Wars of Light and Shadow, though not my introduction to Jenny's work, as I said, and I read it, and I was just floored. And as has floated around, I've since coined the term for the series, that people picked up and just referred to it as transcendent fantasy because it's just it and I read a lot back then, and I still do, but probably not as much as I did then, and was just this was like nothing else I'd ever read. And I went back, grabbed Curse, and read it, and then just found that Warhost of Vastmark was coming soon, so I got it in paperback as well, and then hunted down hardcovers for all of them. I have it here somewhere. My first hardcover that I was able to find was the U.S. hardcover of Ships, but it was like a library discard. So it's kind of the spine's kind of leaning and whatnot. So I don't read it much, but and it was also just hard to find in general. I think some people have been able to find copies of it in better shape now than you could find then, which I just boggles my mind. But just the evolution of the internet. But I don't know. It's like I've read some authors, and I would read them, and I'd start it, and I was like, okay, I don't get this, and I put it down, and sometimes I'll come back to them later, and I picked it up, but I never had that issue with anything that he's written. I just picked it up, I started reading, and I saw someone once was talking about reading something, and they were just talking about how maybe it was me even. You could just pick it up and start reading, and it didn't matter where you are. But as soon as you picked it up, everything that's around you, the noise, whatnot, it just completely fades away. You're not where you are anymore. You're right there in the book, and you're there in that world until you stop, close the book, or mark your page or whatever. And that's how it is for me with her books. It's just I start reading and I'm on Aethera or I'm in Cafeland, just anywhere, any world she creates. I'm like, this is so richly detailed, so vivid, and there are authors out there that I think have a similar level of detail to their work, but I've never had any other author that actually hits that. I'm completely lost in this world as soon as I open the page. It's like I enjoy the book, but it doesn't immerse me the way her stuff does.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I feel the same way as an author and as a reader. She is peerless for me. Jenny is, and and yes, I don't think you get enough credit for having coined that phrase, a transcendent fantasy and or transcendental prose, as I've also heard you describe her writing, which is again, it just transport you. Her use of adjectives, etc., is just it's superlative. It's beyond compare. It's a class by itself. Now you've also had the opportunity to interact, personally with Jenny on lives, etc. over the years, and she has so much respect for you, and she gives you a lot of credit, as you know, for being one of the first supporters of her work, someone who always keeps her work in their public consciousness and always boosts her work. So, and of course we all know that about you and how supportive you've been, and we give you a lot of kudos for that. What can you say about Jenny the person now that you've got to know her a bit and interact with her over the years as well? We know that you have infinite respect for her as a writer, but what about Jenny the person?
Amazing, extremely insightful person. I've loved attending, some of the conventions where she, with discussions she's had, and just, from following her on social media and, here and there in discussions, things that she does, outside of writing, she's, horseback mounted search and rescue work, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of other things that she's done, but just a massive wealth of knowledge, and incredibly fascinating. And I love to have discussions, and she'll start talking about things, and all the things that she's seen and done. So all the respect, and I know this is kind of not the kind of floundering of my words here, but amazing person, and I just I don't know, I don't have enough words to where I can just stumble over and repeat myself. But yes, utmost respect, and wish we had more people like her.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. She is amazing. She's such a wonderful person, so generous and giving of her time, and so supportive of others. And that is, that's one of the reasons why we all love her, not just her work. And again, Chibipoe, for you, just again, I just have to, give you kudos and acknowledgement for how amazing you are. The community, all the things you do, all the people you support, everything you've done to support Jenny, who is an iconic author who really, hasn't gotten her due, perhaps, as being one of the iconic authors, in fantasy, along with the Robin Hobbs and the George R. R. Martins and the Jordans, etc. But I think slowly, thanks to people like you, she's having certainly a renaissance in terms of awareness and reading of her work. So, and it's so well deserved. So, but yeah, once again, kudos for doing that, because Jenny does deserve all the recognition. So, and you deserve it in turn for what you do.
And I would be remiss, not saying, you as well. You've, done a lot for, promoting it with, discussions you've had, and Blaze, of course, because he, we can't dismiss him, because he was a big existing presence on BookTube, and a big one in sparking the current situation, so it's like I've helped, but there's a lot of us out there. So
and if we keep, and we can't forget the wonderful Blaze and Coda under the radar books. And there's a lot of people that have been really pushing over the years, a lot of unsung heroes, and I hope to have some of them feature them as well, as I've had you on the channel. So that would be great. Of course, and I want to also give you a lot of praise and kudos and deep, heartfelt appreciation for all you've done to support my work and boost my stuff and write reviews and all that. And you've done that for many authors. So yeah, I just think that what you do is so invaluable, Chibipoe, and I just want it is recognized and appreciated. It really means a lot. So
welcome. Thank you, and you're welcome. And I'm side eyeing you now because I'm still waiting for you to get back to me about the latest book.
Well, so you, oh, and you got to forgive me. So, and I got to remember where we left off with that. I think I was supposed to send you a copy. Was I not? Did I not send you a copy?
Yeah, I had sent you the message. Where we can, I know, we can talk more about it later. But yeah, I had sent you the message about getting a signed copy, buying one off of you, and hadn't heard back from you yet.
Yeah, I apologize. I've been remiss in that. I think that's
I
totally
figured
my
you were busy.
fault.
It's all good.
That's totally my fault. We gotta get that done. So we will get that. I'll get on that ASAP. Yeah. So as we turn the conversation, I do want to say, and if I can be permitted to say, you're an amazing writer yourself, and I'm not sure if people realize, what you're doing in terms of your own writing. So can you chat a bit about that?
Of course. Let's see. Do you want me to talk about the stuff that I'm writing, or just
Yeah, whatever you're willing to talk about that score, because I think you'd be really interested.
Uh, well, I'll get to the things I'm writing specifically, but this is I want to backtrack a little, and it's sort of um, a little trip here, but like from as young as I can remember, and you've chatted with Jenny and others, so you may see hear some similar uh, themes here. And with this uh, um, is I've always been fascinated with stories, and my earliest memories of it, of that fascination, weren't actually with books. Uh, it was with um, TV, you know, um, like very early '80s, and I would just right around the time where certain changes in the law allowed shows to be made that were largely intended as toy commercials, but various there were various comic book and actual writers and television writers that worked on those, and produced some stories that for a good portion of my generation and were completely captivated by. And I loved stories, and I was like, I like these. They may be kind of simple, but they resonated with me. And so from there I went into graduated from, while still very young, from, it's like, well, I like these stories, but I want to tell my own. And this is before it even, I knew how to write and everything, but, my brain had not connected to, it's like, well, I could put the pencil down. We're talking under 10 years old, I could put a pencil and start writing on paper, but, it didn't really occur to me to do that. And I wasn't the most sociable of, kids. So I'd be off in my own little world a lot of the time. And, I would just, create stories in my head. And, sometimes I'd just be, lounging around, at home and whatever. And I'd just start, like I said, maybe it was some, social lacking. So, from, not having a lot of social socializing with other kids, but I just start telling stories out loud and talking. And this is where I say you might see some commonalities with some of the things that Jenny said. I didn't have the most receptive of a family in how that was received, because I would do what just felt naturally. I'm telling a story, and I'm using my hands to express things, making and whatnot. And yeah, that kind of got the pressures to conform and to be like, oh, stop doing that, and you're acting weird and whatnot. Where I'm just like, this is what storytellers would do, make gestures and whatnot to draw people's attention, which thing I know now. But like I said, it was a bit derided by family at the time, but didn't really stop me. And then eventually I discovered that it's like, oh, hey, I can write things down. And started doing that, through, I don't know, remember what the first thing, how long ago the first thing I wrote was. I think I've got the notebooks buried in here somewhere, which is kind of horrifying, because I look back at what, very preteen me and stuff was writing, and I'm like, what was I on? And I'm like, this must never see the light of day. and and then just kept on with that. I'd get ideas. Some of them, would be original stuff I think of. Some of them would be like, oh, I'm gonna take this. I like this idea. Concept from this show and whatnot, and it's like I'm gonna run with that idea. Not necessarily even like fan fiction, but just like basic premise of something that was. I'll just use Highlander.
Yeah.
As an example, is like what's an immortal person, and how they deal with the world and things like that, and it's basic ideas like that, and then eventually into more complex stuff. And then at some point I discovered fan fiction. I wasn't ever a huge fan fiction presence. Like I do have some fan fiction out there. I have the dubious, especially now, the dubious pleasure of being at least the first author that I'm aware of, and this is from back in the early 2000s, mid to early to mid 2000s, of the first fan fiction author that I know of who wrote a fan fiction crossing over the Harry Potter franchise with the anime Naruto. I don't think that's an amazing thing to be, proud of, but it is a thing that, as far as I know, I'm the first one, existing. Don't go looking for it. It's not good. I'm not even going to tell you the title. It's like you can probably find it using my username, but it's bad. We don't. That was like the early 20s. We don't want to talk about that either, and how bad it was, but. Then back in 2000, maybe it's 2011, or it might have been even earlier than that. I'd have to dig the dates out, or date stamps off the files to be sure. I was poking at National Novel Writing Month, in November, and had an idea for that, and it was ended up being the kernel of what's the actual novel that I'm working on, which doesn't have a proper title, so I can't really give it. It's just got a working title of Doors, which is spectacularly uninformative. But I started poking at that, and I'd say it was the inception, but it was more that's like this is when I created the principal character, and then what it is now is completely different from what it was when I first created principal character, and I've kept it that, and then at a point back in 2013, I got the basically writing fever, and I churned out hundreds of thousands of words over a very short span of time. A couple of months. Relatively short because but it's an incomplete chunk because a good portion of the final sequence of events is still unwritten, but beginning and middle is pretty much all there, and parts of the end, and I turned that out from like July to November, and this will get into a little personal stuff here, but and then it sort of derailed because of which is a familiar refrain for present time, but because of job issues, and those persisted for a while until February, at which point I moved, from where I was out, from the East Coast in North Carolina out to the West Coast, which was a pretty big jump. and then got some work, and kept plugging away at it, but didn't get a lot too far. Um, other than just like making some changes, and at one point realizing it's like, yeah, this based on what I knew about trying to get published, that I'm like, yeah, this is a lot of words. I've seen published authors vociferously complain because the publishing companies houses don't want to deal with that many words. So I was like, okay, I will cut this up into smaller sections, and sort of and then figured out where I was gonna what those breakpoints would be, and set that up. And then that was pre-COVID, and then COVID happened, and for several years there, my writing was just dead. I couldn't get words on a page, which really, really sucked. um, but in this past year, to which I have my esteemed host here to thank for it. Someone started talking about writing with me and expressed an interest, and I tentatively threw stuff at him to be like, all right, here it is. Don't feel bad if it's don't blame me if it's horrible, and inflicted some of my writing. Both. I think I linked you some of the other fan fiction too that I did when I was not in the best of headspace. So, and so that person's encouragement, I'm not naming any names here, PL, got me to start working on that again. What's that? That was late last year. Yeah, towards the beginning of this year, and I sat down and I'd been resolved on it. It was beginning earlier this year, and firmly outlined where everything wanted to go, and have been plugging away at that. So I am I have a whole bunch of words for the first volume, but I still have a lot of work to do with it to account for things and where I move things, and then little wrinkles like in the last chapter or the last scene, a character who wasn't supposed to show up in that scene at all decides that she's just going to show up there, and I'm like sitting there thinking, I'm like, wait, how does this change stuff that happens later, because she's supposed to do X, Y, and Z later, and I'm like, but if she's here and she's giving this information to this character, does that mean she was a double agent for the protagonist this whole time? What is going on? Why are you doing this to me? But I managed to work that one out. But I still have like character interactions and change, and I'm not like unaware that even once I get all this done, I'm probably still going to have to like throw it at someone to be like, all right, tell me how horrible this is and what I need to fix, because I know I've even made notes as I go and be like, there needs to be more character description here, or and so forth. Anyway, that's I don't know if that answers your question, or if I need to keep going. I can keep going. I've just sort of rambled now for a while, so.
No, it's a fantastic response, and again, like I have to tell anyone who's listening, you're a fantastic writer. I loved what I did. I'm saying that generally. I think there's so many aspects of your writing that I love. I think the one I really loved was the character struggle, and the character trying to find out who they are, who they were attracted to, who they love. To find out about themselves, so really cool, like steamy parts, and a lot of like titillation, and it's just really well done, and I love the world, I think I haven't, I'm still trying to figure out aspects of the world, but it's so well done. The world building is fascinating, just, the concepts, again, I can't give away too much, obviously, but yeah, I just thought it was great. I just can't wait to see it come out in a perhaps a novel form one day. I guess, so obviously my questions are, and again, I know you can't review everything, but so what are your plans for, at least, the stuff that I read, which I absolutely loved. Do you have specific plans for it, or you can reveal?
I want to, get it published and out there for people. Like I said, I still have a lot of work to, get it into, even what I feel is a appropriate first draft stage. Because even though I've sort of got a coherent narrative with how I've arranged things, I did cut up a whole bits, and took stuff, some of the stuff you read, because I believe I did send you everything of the first story.
Yeah.
Though I've made a bunch of changes now, but the overall of what I sent you is there. But when I was cutting it up and trying to apply breakpoints and rearrange things, I took some stuff and I'm like, all right, these things, it's like I can put these things actually didn't happen until later, but I'm going to move them up here and have them happen much sooner, because I felt it, ended up flowing a lot better. But yes, I do want to get it out there for people to read. I don't know what format I'm gonna pursue that in. If it'll be similar to how you're doing self-publishing, because my understanding with self-publishing that does take a fair bit of investment on your own part, with getting a publishing house and whatnot or a printing house, I should say, because from following some other authors who moved to self-publishing, like trying to get the stuff published through Ingram, for example, is a bit of a chore, and so I don't know if I'll get it complete, and then put it out as web fiction and like hide it behind hey, if you want to read this, then pay X amount. It's like I do have a little Patreon that I started to try to similar to job issues, to try to be like, hey, maybe I can monetize my writing, but that hasn't produced a whole lot in the way of returns. So but honestly, I'd absolutely love if I could get it on a shelf. That would be fantastic. Or ebooks too. But yeah, I understand a lot of the ebook returned profits are not that great. But if you're getting into writing for profit, then your best bet is to at least from what I've seen from a bunch of authors, your best bet is probably to write porn for commissions, because apparently that's a very, very popular thing. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that there's so many ways you publish your book. I mean, whether that's you get a Kickstarter going and you maybe get it funded that way, or there's all kinds of ways. I just have a lot of confidence that your stuff is amazing. So when one way or another, I'm just hopeful and optimistic and positive that you're going to get out there in one way or another. But I can't wait, and obviously there's no rush, but other than my own anxiousness to see the finished work and see it get out there. But I just wish you all the best. I don't have no doubt you're gonna be successful however you choose to publish it, and that it's gonna be something that people are gonna really want to read. So I'm just wishing you nothing but the best with your writing. I think it's really exciting.
So thank you. And like I said, I do plan to try to get it out there. I just have to get things going and be like, all right, let's make these adjustments and get more than 300 words of changes. That's probably the most demoralizing thing lately when I'm trying to change things, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to change this this paragraph, and I'm going to add this many words, but then I was like, I deleted these other paragraphs, and so my word count ends up in a net zero or a net negative. I'm like, well, that's kind of demoralizing. I just made all these words, but the total number didn't go up any. But part of what I'm doing right now is, which may be why it's slow, is but like, all right, I'm going to tweak this and try to make it scene work better and so forth. And I know I've heard plenty of authors be like, don't try to edit and do the editing and the creation process at the same time, because they will oppose each other. So
no, I totally get it. I just want to say again, I just think it's going to be fantastic whatever comes out. And wishing you nothing but the best. I would like to know as we're winding down, getting near close to an hour, and you've been so amazing and just with your time, I want to respect it. Do you have any now? You talked about Danny Wirtz, of course, and her amazing work. I think a lot of us, more and more people are discovering her and discovering how incredible her work is. Whereas Light Shadow, her main series, and she has several other series, and standalones. Do you have any other authors that you'd like to rec for anyone listening out there while you?
Well, obviously, this is others, so I can't say, Jenny, because I already recommended her. I did mention Michelle West, her Essalian series. I'm a really big fan of. Since she lost, since Penguin and Random House, decided not to continue it. I'd been supporting her, a little bit, with so she can self-publish the final series of that books of that. Let's see who else. I know I have more. Let me see. Tad Williams, of course.
Yes.
And I'm trying to think of who else. Oh, and I would be remiss. It's like I'll go back a little bit, and I know some people will be familiar with them, because they're one of the first things I found in just like a paperback section, and I don't think you can even find her books now. But I think they were aimed at younger audiences. The author was Sydney Van. I don't know if this is Syok or Syok. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2023, but she was a sci-fi writer. And she did an assortment of stuff, and she had a little series of books that she published in the 70s and early 80s. I only ever read the latter three of the series, but she did some more up to like 91 was the last book she said. I don't know if they did there, but like I said, trying to find them is, probably I don't even know if they're on Kindle, but she would be one that's like I said, Sydney Van, and then SCYOC. So she's one. Robin McKinley. And I'm just trying to think of those that lesser known that aren't getting quite hit by recency bias. The way see it tends to come up a lot now. And Janny recommended this one to me. It's by by R.M. Melouche. It's a sci-fi series, The Tour of the Merrimack. And it's a space series where America is at war with basically ancient Rome never went away and continued to operate in secret, and then they moved out into space, and now the U.S. is basically at war with them in space.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, and it has one of the niftiest takes on a time travel scenario in the first book that that I was just like, I had to stop, and when it happened, and I stopped, and I was like, wait, what just happened? Did they misprint here? And I flipped back several pages trying to figure out what had just happened, and then I was like, oh wow, that just blew my mind. So I want to recommend that one. Let's see.
Okay.
Julian May is one I want to recommend. She has a number of books, but I was really fond of both the ones she did by herself, actually more than the first one. She did a collaborative work with. We have someone else in. Hello, Timothy.
Timothy, the wonderful Timothy Wolf. Hey, happy Wednesday to you too, Timothy. A brilliant author. Check out his books, fabulous. And you forgive the acronym here. It's the science fiction self-published novella contest, which he's done extremely well in. He's been so generous and gifted me his series, which I plan to binge read next year. That's my plan in early next year to binge read the whole thing. And I plan to read everything he writes. So Timothy's an awesome gent, great supporter of the community as well. So thanks for stopping by, my friend.
Let's see, what was this? Oh yeah, so yeah, she did a collaboration book with Andre Norton and Marion Zimmer Bradley. And it was about three sisters, and they each wrote one of the sisters in the story. And the first book is okay, but kind of uneven in quality because you got three of them, and different people, writing, different sections, and I don't know how much of a, it's like, here's my chapter, because and how much sharing and going over each chapter that they did, because basically the story in the first book gets the three sisters separated and they're all off on their own. So It does definitely kind of feel like in the first book, but that's the Trillium series. Black Trillium is the first one. And then Julian May, and they all three did follow-ups, or at least Andre Norton and Julian May did. I don't remember if Marion Zimmer Bradley did, but
she fell into some controvery there, Marion Zimmer Bradley.
Yeah, I was going to say also anything with Marion Zimmer Bradley is just like that's a whole other kettle of worms. So let's just move on from that. But Julian May did two more books in the series, Blood Trillium and Sky Trillium, I think it was, which I both just her by herself writing them, and I'm like, okay, these are awesome and fantastic, and so I recommend those by her, and she's got several others like the Saga of Paleocene's Exile, and I'm sure that I could dig up more out of my mind, but like I said, I'm trying to avoid a lot of the the common ones, but I'm not like I said, I'm not a huge Sanderson fan, so I'm not going to recommend him, and I haven't finished Malazan, so I don't feel like and everybody else will recommend it anyway, so
those still some great recs and some ones that perhaps a lot of people haven't heard of. So thank you so much for that, Chibipoe. That's really appreciated. Those are really good recs. You kind of blossoming my TBR. I'm not upset. I'm all for that. So
and then part of the problem is a lot of the stuff I started out reading came from the era of Dawes, with the Yellow Book covers, and there were so many of those, and I've forgotten so many of those names. I remember one or two names, but a lot of times I just read it, and like C.J. Shera, of course, Cherry. Her stuff I love, Joe Clayton, but I can't think of too many other names from those, which is frustrating because there was a whole lot of stuff there. So
so that's all great stuff, man, and we really appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of the readers will be scrambling to add to their Goodreads with that, and I know I will be. So those are great recs. So we really appreciate it. But listen, I do want to respect your time. Oh yes, and
I can. If you have more questions, I'm happy to sit here and talk more. But I know it's like getting to 8:00 for you, so I don't know if you've had dinner or anything. So
that's always the deal. But no, I love chatting to you, and hopefully you're willing to come back again so we can chat some more, and maybe we'll have an earlier session, maybe on like a weekend where we can talk for a couple hours and really kind of get into things. I did want to put up this comment by Timothy. I got book 5 and Malazan had to take a break. Malazan. Yeah, I finished it, Timothy. I think it's an amazing series. I understand the highs and the lows, but I think it is worth it. You stick with it, and then in the end of the day, I think you'll feel it was worth the endeavor, right? So,
Um, I may lose my book reader cred here, but like I first read Malazan on loan from a friend who was, you know, you know, extolled them as the greatest thing ever. And so I was like, okay, whatever. He's letting me borrow them. I'll give it a try. And I picked up some from a couple from a sci-fi book club, subscription, and read all the way through to the end of book 8.
wow.
Book 9 was out, but was like hard to find, if I recall. And book 10, The Crippled God, wasn't out yet. And by the time I got to the end of the 8, I was like, I was like, what's going on? Why does everybody like this? Because it just, it felt like it just went all over the place to me. Timothy just said, this book opened, there's new content, new characters. And I'm like, who are these people? What does this have to do with anything? And, I mean, I didn't think it was written badly, but I felt it was all over the place. So it never really hooked me. I did recently, because I got them on a Humble Bundle deal. I have all the books, on ebook. And so I was like, okay, I will pick up where I left off and start book 9.
Yeah.
I'm going to safely say that was a mistake, because I opened book 9 and I had no idea what was going on. This didn't appear to have anything to do with anything that had happened before that I could remember. Because I remembered how book 8 ended and whatnot, but then I was like, what is this? What does this have to do with anything? So I was like, maybe I'll go back and start from the beginning and, try again. I don't know. But it was, it's kind of it just kind of falls flat for me. So
no, and you're not losing your credit at all. I mean, a lot of people, Malazan is not for them. You're not at all alone in that category. Chibipoe, it did work for me, and I'll admit, the first was a struggle. I remember the first, but like I was like, ooh, I don't know. But then I think around book 3, I really started to get into it. And then I decided to binge read it, and I found that easier because then I could make those connections. Because, like you said, it's so jarring and as Timothy pointed out, you start with these characters and then they don't show up in the next book, and then they're referred to. Yeah, it does get, I think, jarring that way. It is definitely still my top 10 series, like traditionally published series of all time. It's not going to be number 1, but that spot's reserved for Jandy's Wars of Light and Shadow. And I don't even know if it's like, but it is still, I think the writing is brilliant. I think it has its moments that are just so incredible, especially the dramatic moments. But yeah, I totally get why people bail on it, and yeah, I totally get it. Like, I get it. So
yeah, it's like learning that it was developed off of their, and I don't know to the extent, developed off of their, role-playing campaign and whatnot. A lot of things started to make sense, because it's like, oh yeah, you get to certain moments, and if you've got any experience with tabletop, I'm like, oh yeah, no, this thing here is where the dice rolls went really well for their characters.
Yeah.
And their characters just did something awesome, and you can actually pinpoint those moments. But yeah, when it's just like, oh yeah, we're gonna open up with this guy who's I don't know if he's a Conan XP or whatever he was supposed to be, and he's just some dude who's incredibly badass, and he's off in the middle of nowhere, and and it has nothing to do with anything else. And I'm like, okay, or we're going to jump back, thousands of years or whatever. And I was like, I'm so very, very confused.
Yeah. There was
all over the place, and didn't seem very focused to me. So, but that's just me.
No, I agree. Those are all very legitimate complaints of Malazan, and I think I think I don't know if I'll ever reread it. Like, I don't know if I could, and I'm sure a reread would probably make a lot more sense. I'd probably pick up a lot more in second reading, but I don't know if the reread value is as high as it's for me with other series that are much more, easy to absorb. For example, Jenny's series, right? So, but still, I think it is an accomplishment. It is a masterpiece. It's just that, yeah, I definitely see the concerns, but for sure. So, Timothy, I hope you stick it out, buddy. I hope you stick it out, and because I think those are certainly series worth reading. Some of these big, long, and iconic series Malazan has a rabid fan base, right? So,
Yeah.
I hope Jenny's because Jenny has a lot of loyal fans, but I hope her series starts to get the same kind of traction, in time, because it certainly deserves it as well. So, in my opinion, anyways.
Yes.
So, but but like I said, Chibipoe, this has been absolutely wonderful. I really enjoyed talking to you. I really hope you'll do me the honor of coming back on the show in the future, and maybe we'll do an afternoon session where we can talk a bit longer. There's a lot of things we still have to cover, and by then also there may be some updates, sure, certainly with your writing. So very much looking forward to that. And again, I'm so honored that you come. Just wondering if you'd do us a favor for everyone who's might catch this later on and who's come for the live as well. Is that and quickly I'll just put up this. Thank you very much, Timothy. I really appreciate the comment. Thank you. I appreciate that. If you'll tell us where to find you on social media, where we can follow you,
social media. I'm not on Twitter anymore. I deleted that sometime last year. Just there's so much negativity there, but I can be found on Bluesky as Chibipoe. I'm also on the Page Chewing forums, and then you can email me.
Fantastic. Well, Chibipoe, again, I'm so honored to have you be my first community appreciation Six Elementals. Hopefully, like I said, you'll come back in the future. Can't wait to read more from you. And I've had a real honor to get a sneak peek at your writing, which is fabulous. Looking forward to that. Quickly for me, plstewart.com is the website for the books. 5 books out now in the Sub-Book John Kingdom series. Book 6, Black Dragon on Red, coming in the spring of 2026. The reviews on Goodreads, and also I'm an assistant at Before We Go blog, led by the wonderful Beth Tabler. Shout out to Beth and our Before We Go blog crew. You can also see me here in terms of YouTube on my channel, PL Stewart, the John Kingdom Saga, and Page Chewing beside my awesome colleague Tina from Maybe to the Pages, as we do a similar type interview series there on YouTube. So once again, everybody, thank you so much for coming by. Everybody who came by in the chat, Timothy, Chris, Mohan, you and anyone who will watch it on replay, you're what makes this type of long form content awesome. So once again, thank you to the amazing Chibipoe, a fantastic member of the community, and thank you so much again for all you do, Chibipoe, and all the support, and it's truly appreciated. And again, we'll